Dear colleagues, welcome to Dublin. It is a great pleasure to see you all here. Let me first warmly thank our Irish colleagues for their generosity and their hospitality over these next few days. Let me also use this opportunity to welcome those of you participating in the meeting of the Standing Committee for the first time. Before we begin, please note that, per usual practice, this meeting is being recorded and the footage will be posted on the OSCE's YouTube page. Should any member wish to raise an issue under point 7, any other business, please inform the International Secretariat at the podium in advance. I take this opportunity to remind all delegations that members wishing to take the floor during the open debates are kindly invited to sign up in the International Secretariat's office at least 1 hour before the start of each session. 1 hour before. To request the floor in the meeting, simply raise your hand or nameplate. Finally, please note that our meeting should conclude at 12:30. I would like to ask you first to adopt the agenda for this meeting, which has been circulated. Can we adopt the agenda? The agenda is adopted.
If you can just use this version and make changes and additions as sign-ups for it.
Then we go to the item number 2, which is the report of the President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Ms. Pia Kauma. Shall I do it here? A written report was distributed last week. I will just highlight the key points. Since the annual session, I have been in direct contact with members of the Bureau and various delegations to decide on some appointments. This is a necessary exercise to ensure that PA has focal points for key OSCE issues, but also to ensure that some major delegations participate in some of the most crucial deliberations in the coming year. Special representatives are a flexible and effective tool for the Assembly, and I'm grateful for the National Parliament's support. We had the opportunity to discuss this between Bureau members yesterday, among other topics. Regarding my external engagements, let me highlight my address to the Permanent Council in Vienna, which was very useful to express our collective support for the Maltese chairpersonship, particularly on sensitive issues such as appointing new OSCE heads and adopting a budget, as well as future chairpersonships beyond the year 2025. This was also the opportunity to present the Bucharest Declaration and highlight our upcoming activities. Last month, I participated in the EU Common Foreign and Security Interparliamentary Conference in Budapest, where I underlined the role of multilateral organizations in fostering security through adherence to international law and a strong commitment to democracy. I hope that we can leverage the election of several former Assembly members to the European Parliament last June to reinforce our cooperation. I had hoped to reinforce our support for the OSCE's third dimension by attending the opening of the Human Dimension Conference yesterday in Warsaw. Regrettably, due to a scheduling conflict, I was unable to be present. In response to a request from ODIHR for representation from the PA, despite the challenges posed by our commitments in Dublin, I wish to extend my sincere thanks to Mr. Zalewski, head of the Polish delegation, whom I also warmly welcome to our Assembly, for his willingness to adjust his plans in order to represent us at this important event. Unfortunately, the chairpersonship later informed us that a strict protocol regarding representation would be enforced, which led to our absence. I deeply regret that inconvenience and assure our colleague that I will raise this issue with the chairpersonship once again. A few weeks ago, I visited Israel and the West Bank with the Secretary General Montella. As we reiterated the Assembly's condemnation of the Hamas attacks and recognition of Israel's right to self-defense, we also called for an end to hostilities and highlighted the humanitarian concerns expressed in Bucharest. Given current events, I have no doubt that we will have opportunities this week to also discuss the situation in Lebanon and the north of Israel, plus Iran's missile attack yesterday. This autumn, we have a packed agenda, including election observation missions to Moldova, Georgia, Uzbekistan, and the United States, in addition to the mission that has already taken place in Azerbaijan, as well as a field visit to Serbia and a conference in Turkmenistan, which we will address in greater detail under point 6 of our agenda. I simply take this opportunity to caution the Standing Committee that while this extensive program underscores our commitment, we will need to remain mindful of our budget constraints in the latter part of this financial year. In closing, I want to thank all of you for your continued dedication. I look forward to your questions and comments. Before I open the floor, Ambassador Panceski will give you some information on discussions in Vienna.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellencies, distinguished Bureau members, thank you for the opportunity to present you developments related to the elections of the 4 OSCE heads of institutions. This brief report comes as a continuation of the regular monthly reports that I submit on behalf of the Vienna office. Let me use this opportunity to thank all the colleagues for their steady support. At the outset, allow me to recall that the mandates of the Secretary General Helga Schmidt, Director of the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, Matteo Mecacci, Representative on Freedom of the Media, Teresa Ribeiro, and High Commissioner on National Minorities, Khairat Abderrahmanov, after being extended at the last moment at the Ministerial Council meeting in Skopje for a limited period of 9 months only, have expired on 3rd September. In order to prevent the leadership vacuum, the Maltese chairpersonship has timely initiated the procedure of appointment of the new heads of institutions in May. In total, 13 candidates applied. Bilateral presentations of candidates were followed with several rounds of informal consultations and expression of preferences by the participating states this summer, resulting in the chair's proposal of the following package: Ambassador Igli Hassani from Albania for the Secretary General, Ambassador Christoph Kamp from the Netherlands for the Director of the Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, Ambassador Ketevan Tsikelashvili from Georgia for High Commissioner on National Minorities, and Ambassador Jan Bratu from Norway for the Representative on Freedom of the Media. It should be noted that Turkey and Greece have jointly presented Ambassador Feridun Siniroglu and Ambassador Maria Telalian as a package candidates for the posts of Secretary General and Director of ODIHR. Upon request of the two countries, the Chair has offered the following alternative package: Ambassador Siniroglu from Turkey for Secretary General, Ambassador Telalian for Director of the Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, Ambassador Tsikelashvili from Georgia for High Commissioner on National Minorities, and Ambassador Bratu for Representative on Freedom of the Media. Tour de Table, held on Monday last week, has revealed that the vast majority of participating states supports consensus and the speedy resolution of the current impasse, with prevailing number of them supporting the Chair's proposal. However, the number of those that support the alternative package is not insignificant. Finally, some participating states continue to insist on consideration of their candidates, for example, Dunja Mijatovic for ODIHR Director and Rita Isak Ndiaye for HCNM. Unfortunately, the deliberations last week have also revealed that we are a bit further from the solution that we have initially thought we were. Dear colleagues, although there were high hopes in the meetings of the Minister Borg as the OSCE chairperson held on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York last week, there is a general expectation that process will continue towards the Ministerial Council in Valletta in December or potentially even after Valletta. Separately or in a package with other issues which are on the OSCE agenda. For example, unified budget, for which there is still no consensus, and or the incoming chairpersonships that Madam President has mentioned a minute ago. Until then, acting heads of institutions will be in place. This would be challenging for High Commission on National Minority and Representative for the Freedom of Media, as these two institutions have personalized mandates, so officers in charge do not have a full capacity. Madam President, allow me to conclude by commending the Maltese chairmanship for its tireless efforts in seeking proper resolution. And vice versa, the Parliamentary Assembly and the President's support in particular are strongly felt and appreciated by the Maltese chair and the institutions. And last but not least, let me also recall that as emphasized in the Bucharest Declaration, it is imperative that we collectively demonstrate the political will necessary to ensure the effective functioning of our organization. I thank you for your kind attention and for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Panceski, and we now go to the speakers list. There are two parliamentarians that have asked the floor, and the first one will be Luis Graça from Portugal on his South Caucasus appointment.
Dear Madam President, thank you for giving me the floor and for appointing me as the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Special Representative on the South Caucasus. This is a huge responsibility, and I'll try, with your support, to do my best and to follow up on the footsteps of my predecessors. This mandate is, like the times we're living, very straightforward, and I intend to fulfill my duties with the cooperation of all our colleagues, especially those from Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia that I salute. However, I also believe that the OSCE principles of dialogue, cooperation, comprehensive security, and sustainable development must be the cornerstone for the future of this region. Let me highlight some of these goals. Open borders and economic integration. This is the best hope for the economic development and for the political stabilization of the region. Just look at the example of the European Union. Increased cooperation at the political and cultural level. Again, the same example by European Union with exchange programs like Erasmus, where students from across Europe can study in another country and above all, to get to know and interact with other cultures. This kind of experience is a true eye-opener that has done more for the European integration than many treaties and rules. Democracy and rule of law, the South Caucasus region has made significant progress. There are still some shortcomings, but the solution is always more democracy, more political participation, and more youth engagement. This region is still facing some difficult challenges, but at the same time has a huge potential that, after decades of conflicts, can set an example of stability and cooperation. The OSCE needs a more prosperous, stronger, united and peaceful Caucasus. I firmly believe that this is the way forward, and I'm counting on all your support to build together this road of peace, freedom and collective development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graza. And the next speaker will be Jelena Nepovic from Montenegro, please.
Thank you, dear Madam President, esteemed colleagues. It's a great pleasure for me to participate for the first time in the autumn meeting in my capacity as the head of Montenegrin delegation. I look forward to actively contributing to the work of the Standing Committee and the Assembly as a whole. I would like to take a moment to speak about OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, OSCE-P, as a vital platform for dialogue. 2 weeks ago, we had the honor of hosting the Inter-Parliamentary Forum of the Southeast European Delegation. This event was organized in the cooperation with the Special Representative, Mr. Hajiani, and the International Secretariat. I also had the opportunity to attend the first Interparliamentary Forum in Tirana, and I can confidently say that this initiative is highly beneficial for fostering regional collaboration. At the second forum held in Montenegro, we exchanged ideas and experience while focusing on the future of tourism as an essential sector for the economies of the CEE region. As discussed during the forum, we are working towards increasing our capacities and creating seamless conditions for visitors so that those traveling to one country can easily reach other in the CEE region. Individually, we may be small markets and economies, but together as a region, we form a significant and competitive economic area. I have observed throughout two forums a strong willingness among colleagues for every country in the region to collaborate and enhance our mutual relation and cooperation. We frequently see the leaders of our region coming together in the forums in the Brussels and elsewhere to work on EU integration and address common regional issues, and it's imperative that we, as parliamentarians, also work closely together to accelerate the progress of CEE region. Our communication should not be conducted through the media, but face to face, as we strive for meaningful cooperation and lasting friendships. Finally, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the delegation from the CEE region for attending the Interparliamentary Forum in Montenegro. A special thank you goes to our colleagues from Italy, Greece, Hungary, Slovenia, Luxembourg, Serbia, and North Macedonia, whose contribution greatly enriched our recent forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nedovic, and thank you also for organizing the Interparliamentary Forum and the whole of Montenegrin team for fostering regional cooperation in southeastern Europe. I next give the floor to our German friend, Daniela de Ritter.
Thank you, Madam President, Excellencies, dear colleagues. I want to address the Assembly as chair of the Ad Hoc Committee on Migration. Since I last reported to you in Bucharest, the committee has carried out its first visit to a partner country for cooperation, Morocco. And it's quite important that we address also the issues of the Middle East in our Assembly. My deepest appreciation goes to the House of Representatives of the Parliament of Morocco, to the members of the delegation and to their staff for hosting the committee and for putting together an excellent program despite the short time frame we had for this visit. And I mainly want to thank Farima Daftari for her precious support. I would also like to thank my fellow committee members for their engagement. I would like to share with you some key takeaways. We choose Morocco in recognition of the fact that this is the only country in the MENA region which has sought to enact significant migration and asylum reforms since 2013. Meeting with a wide range of stakeholders in Rabat on the 19th September, our delegation of 9 members learned about the country's migration policies and how these are designed to address its unique strategic position at the heart of migration flows between Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, making it a country of immigration, transit, and increasingly a destination country. The officials were encountered emphasized their responsibility to prevent irregular migration towards Europe, which is a very specific topic. The issue of how sustainable returns can be enhanced both from Europe to Morocco as well as from Morocco to countries of origin was also high on the agenda. What struck me in particular was the Moroccan officials have a positive approach to migration, and we all need that in our countries as well, focusing on the positive contribution of international mobility rather than on the negative aspects of migration. For example, they are devising programs to address brain drain and boost circular migration through a national strategy for professional international mobility and support for entrepreneurship. Visiting the port of Tanger, created in 2007, we heard how this gigantic hub for global trade and investment has played a crucial role in providing local opportunities with the creation of 110,000 jobs since its establishment. The Moroccan authorities have been making significant efforts to regularize the status of nearly 50,000 migrants and refugees in Morocco in two separate ways in 2014 and 2017. As parliamentarians, we took note of the fact that the necessary legislative framework is not yet in place. This would represent a significant step in enhancing access to asylum and improving asylum procedures for persons in need of protection, in particular vulnerable groups like unaccompanied minors and women. It was heartwarming to learn more about the work of the Fondation Orient-Occident with vulnerable refugees in the absence of a national reception system. We will meet later today to discuss in greater details our observations from the Morocco visit and to discussing upcoming activities, which I hope will include a mission to Spain and the Canarian Islands, which have again been experiencing a spike in arrivals as a result of structured controls along the Mediterranean routes. Countless others have perished at sea. Let's remember that. These tragedies further serve to underline the need to promote safe and regular pathways for migration, as emphasized in our resolution adopted in Bucharest this year during the summer meeting. The committee will also discuss how it can address the impact of the escalation of the situation in the Middle East and anticipate refugee flows. Let me please summarize the main takeaways. I would like to conclude by reiterating three key messages. We cannot, first of all, continue to let a handful of countries bear responsibility for irregular migration. Solidarity, cooperation, and coordination should be the key guiding principles in addressing irregular migration. Secondly, we need to seriously boost international efforts to address the root causes of migration, such as conflict, persecution, and also increasingly the impacts of climate change. Third and finally, we need to reframe the migration issue, adopting a positive approach that emphasizes the contributions and opportunities of international mobility. This is essential for encouraging constructive discussion about migration. Thank you, dear President. Thank you, dear colleagues, for your attention.
Thank you, Daniela. And our next speaker is from Turkey. Mr. Selami Altinok, you have the floor.
Sayın Başkan, öncelikle raporunuz ve çalışmalarınız için teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Ancak şaşkınlığımı ve rahatsızlığımı da dile getirmek isterim. İsrail-Filistin ziyaretinden bahseden paragraf, İsrail'e yönelik saldırıları kınarken, Gazze'de yaşanan büyük insani felaketi ve Filistin halkının devam eden acılarını görmezden gelmektedir. Ziyaretiniz sırasında görüşmelerde de tutum bu şekilde miydi merak ediyorum. Bu eksiklik sadece dengeden yoksun olmakla kalmıyor, aynı zamanda bazı ülkelerin korkusuyla özellikle Filistinlilerin hakları söz konusu olduğunda sahadaki tüm gerçekliği ele alma konusundaki isteksizliğinizi de yansıtıyor gibi görünüyor. Agit adına yapılan böylesine bir ziyarette yapılan söylemlerin tek taraflılığı pek çok ülkeyi temsil eden, farklı siyasi görüşleri yansıtan bir uluslararası platforma yakışmayan bir tutumdur. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Esteemed President, first of all, I would like to thank you for your report and your work. However, I also would like to express my surprise and discomfort. The paragraph mentioning the visit to Palestine and Israel while condemning the attacks against Israel ignores the great humanitarian disaster in Gaza and the ongoing suffering of the Palestinian people. And I wonder if this was the attitude during the meetings throughout your visit. This shortcoming not only lacks balance, but also appears to reflect an unwillingness and reservation due to some countries to address the full reality on the ground, especially when it comes to the rights of the Palestinians. The one-sidedness of the statements made during such a visit on behalf of the OSCE PA is an attitude that does not befit an international platform representing many countries and reflecting different political views. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Altinok. I would like to comment on that, the main reason why me and Mr. Montella wanted to pay a visit to that region was to find out why we are in this situation and to learn firsthand, both from the Palestinian side and from the Israeli side, what they think of the situation and what is the way out, so that we could again find a peaceful solution to one of the crises that we are facing in the world. And I think our visit was very informative, and we also had a possibility to go near Gaza area, where we saw the humanitarian crisis and how the people who live in the area are trying to solve the situation and ease the pain of the people who are living in those conditions. I can assure you, Mr. Altinok, that OSCE PA is trying to be as neutral as possible in this situation and to listen to all participating states and also all the countries in the area in order to have a as comprehensive idea of what is going on in the area and to find a peaceful solution. That is the only objective we have, and if you find that we have been biased in somehow, we will of course try to improve in the future. That is all I can say at this point. Our next speaker comes from Sweden, and Mr. Söder, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank you for this extensive report and for your engagement in representing the Assembly towards other stakeholders in these challenging times. This Assembly adopts every year a declaration of political policies. This is our core document that represents all standpoints of us as delegates and participating states. We can agree on their commitments and we can disagree on them, but this is the views of this Assembly for a long time forward. The Russian aggression towards neighboring countries as well as other countries has been going on for decades. I want to emphasize that this Assembly's view is clear on what happens in Ukraine. There is a Russian war of aggression against Ukraine going on. This is the word used by the OSCE executive body. I would like to ask the President in what way we as Assembly are working and continue to work on our declaration. I note with concern that the President in her report calls Russia's evilness for actions in Ukraine. I would also like to remind the President about the adopted paragraphs in this declaration where the Secretary General of the OSCE Assembly and the executive body are asked to run security checks on staff in our organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Söder. Our Bucharest Declaration expressed deep collective concern over the escalating trend of non-compliance with international rules as evidenced by the Russian Federation's ongoing aggression against Ukraine. To uphold the OSCE's promise, it is essential that all participating states strictly adhere to our shared commitments. In this context, our parliaments must champion a culture of compliance and accountability through robust parliamentary advocacy, legislative action, and rigorous oversight. The repeated missile attacks on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine have highlighted the grave consequences of ignoring international humanitarian law. These heinous acts, which target the most vulnerable, serve as a stark reminder of the urgent need for our collective action. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has univocally condemned these attacks, emphasizing the importance of immediate cessation and adherence to international obligations. It is imperative that we continue to support Ukraine and ensure that such violations are met with strong and unified responses from the international community. I next give the floor to our Spanish friend, Per Pons. Per, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, dear President. I think I will speak in Spanish if you don't mind.
Firstly, I wish to join the representative of Turkey and say quite sincerely, from the political analysis that we're conducting here, that's what we're here for, I think that this report is very soft politically. It barely talks about the vision that we have. It barely mentions the critical situation. It's a critical situation that we are experiencing in Ukraine and the extremely critical situation in the Middle East. So I'm wondering, really, what is the role that this assembly wants to have? We are gathered here as parliamentarians. I don't want to be an observer. I don't want to inform people of what's going on. I want to be part of the solution, part of the changes. I want to be part of the conflict resolution. Therefore, certain points I would like to mention first. We're seeing an escalation in the Middle East, which is extremely dangerous. What is the role of our assembly? To observe? The role that we have is to at least be at the same level as we were in Ukraine. Practically nothing is said about Ukraine and Russia's aggression against Ukraine in this document. There's basically nothing there. There's also nothing about climate change. We're going to have COP29. We're going to be observers. And it seems that that's not an emergency. It is combating climate change. And I'd also like to refer to what Madam Derrida said with regard to demography and migration. The Draghi report has just come out, which refers to the need to have more migrants in a region like the European region. Therefore, another issue to be tackled. And one more, you talked about observations of elections. That's great. But we need to talk about democracy in times of war and authoritarian democracies. I think if we can't go into more depth in this report and explain our position with regard to the escalation that Israel has started in recent months, I'd like to know what kind of declaration are we going to make here a year on. We all condemned what happened on the 7th of October, but what are we going to do here this week with regard to what is going on in terms of the actions of the Israeli authorities recently, so with 40,000 victims, including many children? Thank you.
Thank you, Per. I would like to comment that my speech was a summary of my personal activities as president, and it was only a summary. It means what I've been doing during the recent months. When it comes to climate change and Ukraine, we will have an opportunity to discuss these issues, what we have as upcoming events in the near future later on during this conference. We will have the PSTU meeting at noon today, and we will have an opportunity to discuss climate change tomorrow. So all of these issues that you, Per Pons, mentioned in your speech are very important, and we are going to address them later on in this conference. The next speaker will be from Greece, Mr. Markopoulos. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Drama of Palestinian people motivates us. We understand how dramatic is the situation in Gaza. We have to be careful when we speak about objectivity of our institution. OSCE is clearly neutral. For the Greek delegation, it's very important to underline the importance for security in Middle East and condemnation of every terrorist attack. But we must not forget that a terrorist organization, Hamas, started the cycle of blood in the 17th of October 2023. 5 days after today, 1 year will be completed after the kidnapping and assassination of hundreds of Israelis. A cycle that continues because of a chain of other terrorist attacks. End of war actions is needed. Missile attacks is a need also to stop. It is also very important to separate a coordinate and international recognized state from organizations acting on behalf of third parties. Clearly, respect for the lives of civilians must prevail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markopoulos. And the next speaker and the last speaker on my list here is Mr. Pritchard from the UK. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. And in a way, our Greek friends stole the comment that I was going to make, but I think it's worth reiterating. Our colleague from Spain mentioned Israel started. Those are the words he used. Israel started. In fact, it was Hamas and arguably Iran started this whole conflict. I think whilst the Assembly needs to remain objective and neutral, in your words, Madam President, I still think that we can continue to call for what I hope that we all agree with, that Hamas should release immediately all the remaining hostages that have not already been murdered or butchered, and lay down their weapons and agree to a permanent ceasefire, which hopefully would then eventually end in a permanent peace. And when people talk about ceasefires, and we heard some comments yesterday in the Bureau meeting and indeed today, even if Israel wanted to stop today, which of course is ultimately its true position, it can't if Hamas continue to fire rockets to attack Israeli citizens through their proxies and directly, and also Hezbollah continue to fire rockets into Israel. What needs to happen is Hezbollah, Hamas, funded, managed, and its leadership run out of Tehran needs to lay down its weapons and to set aside violence and to work towards a permanent and peaceful solution in the region. And of course, even when this does end, and at some point it will end, the whole issue of governance, which of course your report, Madam President, touches on, governance not only in the nation states that we represent and those that in our partnership nations, but the governance in a post-conflict Gaza, the governance in a post-conflict West Bank, the governance in a post-conflict Lebanon. As I mentioned yesterday, and I had no idea as I was speaking that rockets are raining down on Israel fired out of Iran, that all roads lead back to Tehran. And it's a bit like, I was thinking, a bit like Russia. We all want peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. We all want peace. That's probably why a lot of us came into politics and are involved in diplomacy, in international relations. But to have a strong peace, we need a strong defense. And the reality is that as long as Iran has its extremist regime in place, it is not only Israel, but it is all of the member states represented here today that are under threat. And like Russia, many of us hoped for the best, wished for the best when they invaded Georgia in 2008. That was a mistake for us to turn away and hope for the best, because that then led to the first invasion, illegal invasion of Ukraine in 2014, which has now led to the second war and invasion in Ukraine, with huge consequences for each of the member states represented here in migration, in financial cost, in having to redeploy defense resources, scarce defense resources from NATO members and other members represented here. So we cannot make the same mistake with Iran. And I don't want to sound like a warmonger. I've talked about peace. But this fight was picked out of Tehran. And this fight does not end in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. It is on our doorsteps. Just ask anybody in the Western Balkans. The Iranian malign, malevolent, sinister influence using some of their embassies and other places to divide societies, to undo democracy, to work directly and indirectly with Russia, with North Korea, and indeed possibly with others too. So we need to all wake up to realize, let's learn the lessons from turning away from Russian aggression, not to do the same with Iranian aggression. Otherwise, a nuclear-armed Iran is going to put all of our constituents, all of our countries, all of our values, all of our objectivity, Madam President, and all of our niceties, diplomatic and political, make them irrelevant as they become nuclear-armed. It will be a paradigm shift in the geopolitics of this world, and it will be a negative retrograde, and in my view, a step backwards for all of those things that our forefathers, and indeed our grandparents, fought for in the Second World War, First World War, and all the wars that we've seen. The dividend of peace must not be destroyed by either Russia or Iran or North Korea. They are hostile to our values, hostile to the peace that we want to see. And we need to make a stand, a strong stand. So I call today for this assembly at some point to make a very strong and explicit statement calling for Iran to desist from its continuation of seeking to undermine Israel's security and the security of each and every member of this assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark Pritchard, for your very strong statement. I see no hands up at the moment, so we are ready to move on our agenda. So we move on to item number 3, which is report of the Treasurer of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Johan Buser. I now give the floor to Johan Buser, our Treasurer, for his report.
Thanks a lot, Madam President, and dear ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates. I would like to express my gratitude to the Houses of the Oireachtas for bringing us together here in the beautiful city of Dublin. It's an honor to address you today as we reflect on the accomplishment and future endeavors of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, while also acknowledging the challenge of the current geopolitical landscape, including those extending to our financial stability. As we have reached the end of our last financial year and the beginning of the new fiscal year, I am pleased to inform that the OSCE already has received approximately half of the total contributions expected for the 2024 and 2025 financial year. At the same time, we must remain vigilant regarding the potential shortfall from the Russian Federation's unpaid contributions. The total amount of unpaid contributions to this date is almost 500,000 euros, which will potentially increase with 262,000 euros during the current financial year. The absence of this significant portion of our budget continues to place strain on our financial resources. Given that the Russian Federation has expressed their intention to suspend themselves from the OSCE, a solution will be needed to mitigate the financial consequences on our organization in the longer term. On this matter, I wish to emphasize that the opinion of the Standing Committee will be guiding for the planning of the long-term financial stability in the upcoming budgeting procedures. Since assuming the post as Treasurer, I have held regular meetings with the International Secretariat to receive updates on the budget, the audit processes, and other financial matters. Most recently, in September, I met with the Secretariat to review the current financial situation. I met with the Secretariat and discussed this further, and also the financial impact of election observation missions planned for this autumn, which we know are quite many. We are actively seeking to bridge the financial gaps by encouraging national delegations to contribute extra budgetary funding for projects, seminars, and conferences that align with the Assembly's goals. I extend my sincere appreciation to the delegations of San Marino, Iceland, Estonia, and Latvia, who have already agreed to make their contributions to meet or exceed the 10,000 euros threshold. Additionally, I'm grateful to the Luxembourg delegation for generously contributing beyond their obligated commitment. And yesterday, I was also informed that the Parliament of Switzerland has decided to give a voluntary contribution of 15,000 euros to the Assembly during this financial year, and thank you for that. And this year, the OSCE will once again undergo a comprehensive audit of the financial accounts conducted by Deloitte. Following the approval of the Standing Committee and a revision of the OSCE financial rules, this audit not only reviews our financial statements, but also encompasses an integrated performance audit. Bringing the OSCE in line with the auditing practices of comparable assemblies, the audit covers several key areas, including governance and compliance with internal financial rules and staff regulations, as well as an analysis of performance and efficiency. This year's audit builds up on the exercise of last year and will deepen into specific focus areas as proposed by the auditor in line with international standards. And in my report, which has been uploaded to the electronic folder, you may find additional information about the audit. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the Armenian Parliament for hosting the autumn meeting last year, and to the Romanian Parliament for organizing the annual session in Bucharest a few months ago. Further, I would like to recognize the invaluable support of the Italian and the German Parliament for seconding personnel to assist with key functions in the International Secretariat. This support is instrumental to the Assembly. Furthermore, I encourage all delegations to remain engaged and consider additional contributions to support our financial needs for the upcoming year, and together we will continue to promote peace, security, and cooperation within the OSCE region. And on a last note, I wish to underline that an inclusive and transparent leadership is the way forward, and that I remain available for any questions about the finances of the OSCE PA. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan, for the comprehensive report. I would like to extend my gratitude to all our delegations and parliaments for their continued support of our work. Special thanks go to Denmark and Austria for hosting the Secretariat headquarters in Copenhagen and the Vienna office, as well as to Italy and Germany for seconding staff, and to the parliaments hosting our statutory meetings. I'm also deeply appreciative of the growing number of delegations that have made voluntary contributions during the previous financial year, and those who have already committed or are planning to do so for the upcoming year. At our last meeting in Bucharest, we were delighted to announce the significant support from Luxembourg, starting 1st of January 2025. Today, I'm equally pleased to announce that Switzerland has generously committed to an additional contribution for the next financial year. Furthermore, I want to express my gratitude to the increasing number of delegations that are making voluntary contributions of up to the suggested minimum of 10,000 euros, which also eases pressures on our budget. Now, are there any comments or questions? I already have one name on the list, and that is from France. Madame Gisèle Jourda, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam President, Treasurer, Secretary General, on behalf of France, I wish to thank you, Madam President, for the significant improvement in the visibility of the actions of the OSCE under your presidency. Thank you very much, Treasurer, for your report as well and for your efforts in order to adjust the financial resources of our Assembly in a highly challenging international environment. With a very heavy election year. Some of the elections are indeed unexpected. I wish to recall the unswerving position of France on and saying that our scale of contributions is now obsolete. It no longer reflects the reality of today's world and the economic development of some of the member states. We know that it is not for the Assembly to change this, but we must be imaginative in coming up with new sources of financing and voluntary contributions. We must also display a serious, rigorous approach to our budget and our finances further to the withdrawal of Russia. We know and aware of the efforts that have already been made, but these efforts must be broadened and in particular stepped up. I recall the position of the President of the Senate and the National Assembly of France. Our budget has to remain constant or in constant euros, and this year it is up almost 4% after increases well above inflation, excluding, of course, the impact of COVID. Now, this being said, I wish to thank you for your attention to this issue in a very difficult budgetary situation in many countries. And I wish to thank the presidency and in particular our host, our Irish host, for the holding of this assembly. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Gisèle.
Thank you very much, Madame Gisèle Jourdan.
So if there are no further questions, we move on our agenda and to item number 4, which is the report of the Secretary General of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Roberto Montella. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I have distributed a written report, so I don't want to go through all of it, and if there are questions on that report, I can take them now. I had prepared, Madam President, a little presentation which was going to reflect what most of you and the Treasurer already covered, which was a list of thank you. I wanted to thank the hosts of the last meetings, but you've done it already. Maybe I should say repetitive juvent. We should say a big thank you, of course, to our host here from Ireland and from Romania, but also the 14 countries that you've mentioned, because we are indeed in a challenging time from a financial point of view, but we can see also that the reality is that many members are coming forth, also without being solicited, to bring in more finances to the Assembly. This shows that you believe in this Assembly, you believe in the work that this Assembly can do. So I'd like to thank again, I mean, you've mentioned 14 countries, but this is Denmark and Austria for hosting our headquarters, Italy and Germany for seconding personnel, Ireland and Portugal for hosting meetings, future meetings, and the extra budgetary contributions. Many have mentioned that the contribution of Luxembourg, which is quite substantial, thank you very much, but also Switzerland, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Latvia, Estonia, and San Marino, who have now considered also meeting the suggestions that were contained in one of our resolutions that the contribution, minimum contribution should be around 10,000 euro. So thank you, all of you, for these additional contributions. It shows that you appreciate the work of this Assembly, the work that the Secretariat is also putting in to service the parliamentarians. Madam President, as we've gone through the thank you now, I think one word has to be said about this meeting. I mean, we really, historically, we've never had so much we've had, of course, difficult political situations, but never have we've had such a very charged international political agenda with the wars ongoing. We are all on our phones receiving alerts of the latest attacks. and wars that go also beyond our area of responsibility. We say this is an assembly that stretches from Vancouver to Vladivostok. The Middle East is not part of our area of responsibility, and yet under your leadership, Madam President, you have understood that it is important for 323 parliamentarians representing 1 billion people to also debate issues that are, yes, not directly into our area of responsibility, but have an impact on our region. So I think we are doing a great thing in these 3 days in Ireland to, of course, discuss the issues more pertinent to our region, the conflict waged by the war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, but also to discuss the situation in the Middle East. And as all conflicts, but especially this one, it's a very divisive conflict. We've already heard today in the Standing Committee, which I remind colleagues is just the governing body of this assembly. It's not the place where we do the main political speeches. They will be done in the plenaries later on. But you can see that the spirits, the sentiment of members are very hot. People want to speak, want to talk about these issues. So it's good that we offer them a venue in the next 3 days, thanks to the Irish generosity. And also that at the end of these 3 days, we will have the Mediterranean Forum. I don't know how much of the Middle East issue will be actually left by the 3rd day, because I'm sure in the next 2 days, many of you will want to steam out your frustrations or your opinions and discuss them all already on these first 2 days. But it is good that we offer this. Now, I said it yesterday in a meeting of the Bureau meeting. We also need to be very realistic with who we are and what we can do. I heard Vice President Pons saying, no, but we have to be part of the solution, we have to be engaged, we have to do something concrete. And I do feel you, because I am the same. I feel like I would like to be able to deliver. I would like to be able to do something concrete, be it on the conflicts more closer to us and in our region, especially the situation in Ukraine, but also in other areas of our region, Southeast Europe, Central Asia, the Caucasus. But we have to be realistic on what is the capabilities that we have, what is the possibilities that we have. This is an assembly of elected politicians who can receive a mandate from the president to be a special representative, a special envoy. This assembly can give itself some tools like ad hoc committees, and I think we've done very well in the past in giving ourselves a tool like an ad hoc committee for the major challenges we have: migration, Ukraine, the fight against terrorism. So we have tried as much as possible, also being creative on what we can really do to tackle the biggest challenges of our time. But there are some issues where they go beyond our capability of actually being able to resolve. So we can debate them here, we can discuss them here, we can represent what we've done through press releases. And mind you, also we had a discussion yesterday in the Bureau. Many of these issues, especially the Middle East, are very divisive. We've heard already here different opinions. We've heard some criticism on your report, Madam President, which I would like to remind members. This is not a political document of the president. It's just an account of the activities of the president from the last time we met up to today. It's not the major political presentation of the president. The president makes a political presentation of the Assembly, which is summed up by the declaration, by the annual declaration of the Assembly. She will make it, she did it one in Vienna at the Permanent Council for the ambassadors in Vienna, and she will make a major address in Valletta on the 4th of December when she meets the ministers. This is where the political positions of this Assembly, summed up in the Bucharest Declaration, are presented to the ministers. So the report here, and some have also had issues on the wording, is simply an account of the activities of the president. It's not the political position of these assemblies. But I'd like to remind us all to have a little bit of a more sense of reality of what we can really do, what we can realistically deliver, and use those capabilities to the maximum. I think we've done it very well on the Ukrainian dossier. We have been on the spot, we have made visits, we have created tools for ourselves to address the issue. We've understood that maybe we are not capable of doing any mediation work or any negotiations at this level, also because one participating state is not participating and is not contributing and is not being constructive, as you all know. So, but I think we have exhausted, at least on that dossier, all our capabilities, and we keep on doing this. On the Middle East, I really ask you, use this opportunity to make your statement, to be able to make your presentations, but do not expect this assembly to be able to play a major role, definitely not in the resolution of this. And this is not being too humble or not being ambitious enough. This is being realistic. Many of you have recalled the visit that the President has made together with myself to Jerusalem, to Ramallah, to Sharem Kalom near Gaza, to Maj al-Shams in the north near Lebanon. We have gone and we've made a very balanced visit, I would say, Madam President. We visit all the aspects of this conflict, but we were really in the position of listeners rather than being able to offer anything, because we do not have the capabilities besides our good intentions and the positions which sometimes are very divided in this assembly, considering our membership and our political convictions. So we've offered that, we have offered the possibility to listen, the possibility to be near, the possibility to debate, but I don't think we have the capability to enter into something that is bigger than ourselves and think that we can resolve conflicts, because I think we would not be paying a sign of respect to our own institutions. And our own institution is very serious and has done great work in many dossiers. One thing that we do great is election observation missions, and this is the great thing I would like to say, Madam President. For the first time, we have 5 elections in a row. Within 4 weeks, we have 4 elections. The major number of participants ever for an election observation missions in the United States, 180 members are participating in this mission. We've never had an operation like this. My colleagues at the Secretariat are working 24/7 to make sure that deployments plans are in place, that the wishes of the members to visit some states are met. So we do very good work in election observation missions in collaboration also with other institutions like the Council of Europe, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and I think that needs to be beefed up, and we have to continue to doing that. So those things, we do them well. Let's keep on doing the things that we do well, but of course, let's give ourselves also the possibility to debate issues of major international attention now with a very realistic approach. And Madam President, the last word of thank, because of the long list of thank you that I wanted to make, was a thank you. Now there are only few members here, but to the members, because I must say that I can see our membership is really touched by what's happening and wants to participate. We've had, since the beginning, let's say, of the new year from September, members going to Norway with the youth team, and they've also were here visiting a prison on Monday. We've had this new forum for Southeast Europe that has been established. They've visited Montenegro. They're about to meet also in Serbia in a different forum. They've been in Albania. Greece and Italy, I think, are going to organize visits for them. Turkmenistan is organizing a visit, which is a new kind of conference at the end of November. You are organizing, Madam President, these new activities, field visits to OSCE election missions in Serbia at the beginning of October. So every week there are a number of 5 activities which include members. Our new special representative on artificial intelligence was also recently addressing a conference. So we are present every week, everywhere, and with our biggest assets. Our biggest asset is the members, is the members' time, the members' willingness to dedicate themselves to these activities, and the Secretariat, and here I thank Gustavo, Andreas, all my colleagues here on the podium for the great work that the Secretariat does, are at the service of these activities that we try to put in place. So thank you very much to all of you. Let's all be very realistic on what we can really do, but let's also be very proud of what we are doing, and I think we are doing a lot and we are doing it well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Mr. Montella. I would like to thank you also for shedding some more light on our visit to the Middle East. And I would also like to say to all of you that if you want to hear more details about our visit, where we exactly went and what we heard, we are of course at your disposal to have any bilateral meetings during these days of our conference. And I would also like to inform you a little bit more about our field visit, which will take next week. We are going to Serbia. I have 16 parliamentarians from various participating states to join me to get to know a little bit more what the governmental side is doing in form of field missions at site in Serbia. So more of that will be told you at our next conference. But now I would like to ask if there is any comments or questions that you would like to make. I can see Mr. Pons, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Roberto for his comments. It's interesting what he said. Firstly, I think we are not a club of friends. We are not a club of friends. We're a parliamentary assembly with different positions. That's the first asset that we have. If we were a club of friends, we wouldn't be here. So I think it's important that we are able to understand that we do have different positions. I didn't say that Israel started any escalation. I said that it initiated this response, which I think is questionable from the point of view of international law. Secondly, we are a platform for dialogue. When we say that we have to be realistic, and you can't achieve a certain thing, I understand, but it's a political attitude. This is a platform for dialogue, and it must be available for any attempt at dialogue that there may be. If we say that we can't do something ourselves, if we as politicians we say that we can't change things, then we have a problem as an organization. Another thing, of course, in that region, we maybe don't have a mandate, but the Ukrainian crisis and the Middle East crisis are united by Iran. We understand that Iran is a vector for both crises. How can you understand the crisis in Ukraine if you don't understand the crisis in the Middle East? Can we just choose the conflicts that we like and not to look at those that we don't like and ignore them? When a report says that it was Israel saying that it's Israel, that's a political step, and it's good to explain that. Well, Israel didn't go on holiday, of course. It's legitimate to ask why one goes to certain places. The values, are they universal or are they not? Are they defended in certain territories or not? So if we say that our action is limited, does that mean that we're not defending values everywhere? No, we are defending universal values everywhere from different political standpoints, more conservative standpoints and more leftist or progressive standpoints, however you'd like to call it. But values need to be defended everywhere. If we say that we work from Vladivostok to Vancouver, that means that we have universal values, and these are explicit and implicit. This debate is very interesting, but let's not fool ourselves. Be careful. Because if you say that you can't do something, well, at that juncture, then you're limiting your ability to act, and we are taking a political decision. It's a political decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Per Pons. I must say that I feel you and I feel your frustration. We are all politicians and we are here to debate, have a good dialogue, and also to find solutions to the difficult situation we are living in. And I must say that we as an organization also must not be content with what we have at the moment. We have to find new tools in order for us to be more effective on the ground. So I entirely agree in what you are saying, I feel you. So is there anybody else who would like to take the floor at this point? If not, then we move on to item number 5, which is consideration of the proposed amendment to the rules of procedure. As mentioned during our previous meetings in Vienna and in Bucharest, upon the initiative of Vice President Irene Charalambidis, the Subcommittee on Rules of Procedure has put forward the proposal that the OSCE President should be elected for a non-renewable 2-year mandate instead of the current once renewable 1-year mandate. If approved by the Standing Committee, this would apply to the next election of the OSCE President during the Porto annual session next year. This overall suggested change has already been introduced at our last 2 Standing Committee meetings. What we have in front of us now is the practical implementation, and I thank Mr. Alizad and Ms. Charalambidis for their work on this text. Mr. Alizad is unable to be here today, but he has conveyed to me that this proposal has full support within the Rules Committee. Yesterday, I received a letter from the head of delegation of Belarus, who was unable to participate in this meeting, voicing his objection to any changes of the rules of procedure in Dublin. This letter has been available in the electronic folder. I would like to give the floor to Vice President Charalambidis to present this proposal.
Thank you, Madam President, and let me congratulate our Irish friends for their excellent organization on this event, on the autumn meeting. Now, when it comes to our amendment, it's true we've discussed it many, many times, and the members of the Rules of Procedure Committee were extremely supportive to this idea. And we had also discussed it during January meeting, Bureau meeting in Copenhagen. And therefore, I am submitting this amendment because I have seen in practice that 1 year is not really a sufficient time frame for the President of the Assembly to implement a coherent program. For example, when the new President is elected at the end of each annual session, the budget as prepared by the previous President is already in place. This negates the new President the opportunity to structure a budget based on initiatives that he or she personally believes to be worth prioritizing. I believe that a mandate of 2 years, which is not renewable, will provide our presidents the time to deliver a stronger sense of direction to our organization and a more long-term vision. The fact that the mandate will be non-renewable provides to our president the incentive to be more decisive and principles-based instead of trying to please as many as possible in order to seek a re-election. Of course, I realize that our choices as members of this Assembly will need to become even more weighted with the possible extension of the presidential mandate. But I believe that as elected officials ourselves, we are in a position to understand that a very brief length of mandate often leads to a piecemeal approach concerning the priorities of the organization. Thank you, Madam President, and I hope this amendment will be supported by the Standing Committee and the plenary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Charalambidis. I have not been informed of any additional opposition to the change proposed ahead of this meeting. I now open the floor for speakers. Ms. Odebrink from Sweden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Carina Ödebrink, and I'm a member of the Swedish delegation and also elected as rapporteur of the Third Committee on Democracy and Human Rights. I think the proposed amendment is important and good as a whole. OSCE is a political organization, and the proposal contributes to strengthening the political assembly and the political dimension. As a rapporteur, I don't have the rights, I think, to make a suggestion, but I can make a contribution for the coming standing committees and for the future. And I think I would like to contribute the 9th paragraph, which is speaking about, I don't have it in front of me now, but the national dimension of the president and vice presidents. I think that's important too. But I would like to have a meaning, a sentence in the paragraph number 9 that says, the assembly, when we are electing president and vice presidents, we also should strive for gender balance. So that's my contribution for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ödebrink. Anybody else? Does any delegation object to the proposed amendment? If not, the amendment is adopted by the Standing Committee. This decision will come into force in 30 days in line with Rule 46.3. Thank you. Dear friends, we will now move on our agenda to item number 6, which is the review of recent OSCPA activities and information on upcoming meetings and activities of the OSCPA. 6.1, election observation missions. We have had one election observation mission since our last annual session. I will invite Mr. Michael Preet from Ireland to report on the early parliamentary elections in Azerbaijan. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. It was my great privilege to be appointed as Special Coordinator of the mission to Azerbaijan, along with my colleague from the Czech Republic, who was head of the short-term observation parliamentary delegation. It was a very effective mission in conjunction with ODIHR, and the conclusions of the delegation and observers were that the elections were substantially in accordance with domestic law, but there were significant shortcomings in terms of the constraints on potential candidates to get their name on the ballot, substantial restrictions in the media access, and overall the conclusions which were published would be critical of the extent of the effective democracy in Azerbaijan. The report was published, as I said, after considerable cooperation between the long-term observation mission and the short-term parliamentary observers, and is available for reference or for consultation by members here. But I think it was important that we were there, and the conclusions are, I think, on balance, unsatisfactory in terms of the democratic system in Azerbaijan. It's, I suppose, geopolitically, it's a really critical country in terms of, you know, its geolocation, proximity to Russia, Iran, but nonetheless, democracy is not deep-rooted in Azerbaijan, I think, in the manner in which we would understand it, in perhaps more Western democracies, but I think there's a long way to go before we could give it a clean bill of health, I think. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Creed. Are there any questions or comments on this observation mission? Denmark, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. I have a question concerning the cooperation with our normal partner in this election observations, the Council of Europe. Was a full Council of Europe delegation participating in the election? And if there was not, why? Thank you.
My understanding is there wasn't. I mean, there are difficulties between the Council of Europe and Azerbaijan, which maybe others might want to go into more detail about it, but there wasn't, as my understanding, a delegation from the Council of Europe at all.
Yeah, I can just integrate. Thank you, Michael, for that. Yeah, the Council of Europe has not been invited by the Azerbaijani authorities. So we had the situation also in the previous elections. We had a long discussion between the then president and the secretary and the president of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe on what to do. Should we still go, or should we decide not to deploy a mission because Council of Europe is not allowed? The reason why the Council of Europe was not allowed is because at that time the president, I think, Tini Cox, was on their blacklist because he had been to Nagorno-Karabakh. So for that reason, the whole delegation was not allowed to go. It was decided at that time that we would still go as long as ODIHR was going to be invited, and this is kind of become our policy now. So if ODIHR is deployed, then it means that the ODIHR can deploy a meaningful asset on the ground, long-term observers. So the methodology of the OSCE is in place, and hence our Parliamentary Assembly, through the authority of the President, does deploy a mission. I mean, this has been the policy, but of course, every policy can be revised, but this was the decision.
Thank you, Michael Creed. Please be reminded that the OSCE will deploy several election observation missions in the coming weeks. To Moldova for the first round of the presidential election on the 20th of October, I have nominated Ms. Lucie Potutskova from Czechia to serve as special coordinator and Mr. Johan Buser from Sweden to serve as head of delegation. A second round may take place on the 3rd of November. To Georgia for the parliamentary elections on the 26th of October, I have nominated Mr. Pascal Alizade from France to serve as special coordinator, and I personally will lead our delegation. To Uzbekistan for the parliamentary elections on the 27th of October, I have nominated Mr. Azai Guliev from Azerbaijan to serve as special coordinator, and Mr. Sargis Kandanian from Armenia to serve as head of delegation. To the United States of America for the general election on the 5th of November, I will serve as special coordinator, and I have appointed Mr. Per Joan Pons from Spain as head of delegation. Please note that the deadlines to register for all these observation missions have passed. No additional registration will be accepted. In total, we will be deploying over 350 observers in the coming weeks. Now, are there any comments? Now I have Uzbekistan and Iceland and Uzbekistan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I'd like to express appreciation for our Irish colleagues for wonderful organization of this session, forum. We're living in challenging time, and perhaps the main reason why we have all the problems today is a deficit of trust and understanding. And I think that it means that it's time for us to apply the role of parliamentarian diplomacy in building trust and understanding between different countries and regions. By the way, in Central Asia, we're doing that. And if a few years ago, describing situation in our region, people used to apply such terms like strategic uncertainty and pre-conflict condition. Today, we are talking about the new spirit of Central Asia, and we might look with more optimism to the future of this region. And I think that the fact that in the recent years, parliamentarian diplomacy and parliamentarian dialogue in the region is upgrading and enhancing, it's one of the factors of the peace building and creating a trust in this region. Months ago, we had in Hiva, in Uzbek city, Hiva, second Interparliamentarian Forum of Central Asia, and I think it's a significant event when we're going first time in history, forming the platform for regional interparliamentarian dialogue. To this extent, I'd like to inform our colleagues that next April in Tashkent, capital of Uzbekistan, there will be 150th Assembly of International Parliamentarian Union. And I think that it's also demonstrates new role of Central Asian countries and Uzbekistan in promoting the interparliamentarian dialogue. Here, I'd like to underscore that we highly appreciate the role of the OSCE Parliamentarian Assembly as an important platform for dialogue. I'd like to express also appreciation to the activity of Madam President, Kouma, and Secretary General, Mr. Montella, for their activity in facilitating dialogue between our regions and for their readiness and openness to cooperation with Central Asian countries and Uzbekistan. Madam President, dear delegates, I think that observing elections is a very important element of our activity. Free and fair elections are lakmus paper for democracy, and it's the only way to create genuine trust between public and government, and that's why it's the only way to create sustainable development. Of course, it's up to the people of any country to decide whether the elections are free and fair, but international observation is a factor of transparency and credibility of any election. That's why we appreciate the decision to send a mission to upcoming elections in Uzbekistan, which will be a remarkable moment in consolidating of modernization of the country and building secular democracy based on the rule of law. I'd like just to point out that it's going to be first time under the adopting new constitution and first time based on the principle of majoritarian and proportional elections. At last, I'd like once again emphasize and express the readiness of Uzbek delegation to our cooperation with Parliamentarian Assembly of OSCE. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Safayev, for updating us on also information about the constitutional changes. We look forward to that mission. And now I give the floor to Mr. Birgit Thorarinsson from Iceland.
Madam President, just a short comment regarding the mission to Azerbaijan. As the Secretary General mentioned, the Council of Europe is not invited, and there's a large number of parliamentarians who are on a blacklist at Azerbaijan. I think almost 70 parliamentarians. And I think we should show our colleagues in Strasbourg some kind of solidarity. I mean, this is unheard of putting so many parliamentarians on a blacklist just for voting in the Council of Europe. So I think we should try to find some way to show that this is something that we do not respect and we do not agree with. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this very important detail into our attention. Thank you, Birger. And now, if there are no further comments, we move on to item number 6.2 regarding ad hoc committees. Let me take this opportunity to inform you that following the departure of Reinhold Lopatka from our assembly, I have appointed Mr. Kamil Aydin from Turkey to serve as chair of the ad hoc committee on countering terrorism, working with Mr. Mark Visi from the United States and Mr. Emanuele Loperfido from Italy as vice chairs. I now invite Mr. Aydin to report on the work of this CCT. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for those good words. Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, and distinguished colleagues, I am honored to report on behalf of the Ad hoc Committee on Countering Terrorism for the first time in my new capacity as chair. I would immediately like to thank our President for her trust. It is a privilege for me, and I assume also for the two new vice chairs, Loperfido from Italy and Visi from the USA, to build on the outstanding achievements of the previous three chairs, Honorable Voristis from Greece, Honorable Raja from Norway, and the Honorable Lopatka from Austria. The importance of the CCT, of its mandate and work has never been more evident. The threats and challenges we confront in tackling terrorism and violent extremism continue to evolve, impacting policy debates across our region. It is evident that radicalization and violent extremism are not occurring in a vacuum. Rather, they are often strictly intertwined with our challenges on our agenda, including wars, organized crime, climate change, and unregulated migration. It's a key to better understand how these phenomena mutually affect each other, so that our efforts can always be aligned to the evolving security landscape and fully compliant with international law. This is a pivotal moment for all our countries. We must continue to invest in our capacity to confront terrorism in all its forms, assuring the safety of our citizens, safeguarding our institutions, and upholding our values. As we do so, it's crucial that we respect the rule of law, demonstrating that we stand for justice and unity, while those who attack us stand for violence and division. If, instead, our counterterrorism responses fail to uphold our democratic values, we would not be much different from those who claim to fight against, and ultimately, we would have already lost our battle. With the advent of new technologies and artificial intelligence, we now have unparalleled tools to counter terrorist threats, but also face unprecedented challenges related to the misuse of new technologies and AI for malicious purposes. A key milestone in recognizing this complex situation has been our resolution on AI and the fight against terrorism, which we unanimously adopted in Bucharest. This innovative policy document, a first in the international arena, as far as I can tell, highlights our collective commitment to responsibility, harnessing the power of AI in the fight against terrorism while safeguarding human rights and fundamental freedoms. At the same time, it recognizes the dangers resulting from the potential misuse of AI for terrorist purposes. Vigilance remains the price of liberty. This is why we must be resolute in leveraging AI as a powerful ally in protecting our citizens. The CCT, through its wide range of initiatives, stays determined to advance the OSCPA's efforts in this field and to lead parliamentary initiatives globally. Since June 2022, we have proudly presided over the United Nations Coordination Mechanism of Parliamentary Assemblies on counterterrorism. as we prepare to hand over the presidency to the next Parliamentary Assembly during the 6th coordination meeting in early December, we will continue to strengthen our strong partnership with the United Nations, including by renewing our MOU. The 6th coordination meeting will be preceded by the 4th Parliamentary Policy Dialogue, which will build on our latest resolution and focus on AI and counterterrorism. Both events will take place in Rome, Italy, in early December, owing to the generous contribution of Italian Parliament. Later in December, we will also co-organize a panel discussion on AI and countering terrorism on the sidelines of the 2024 Internet Governance Forum in Riyadh. Again, a great opportunity to showcase of our pioneering parliamentary work in this field on a global stage. Moreover, we plan on continuing our practice on conducting field visits to participating states, enabling us to exchange crucial insights gained in our respective nations and foster alignment on various matters outlined in our agenda. We are currently exploring options for 2025, and I hope to be able to tell you more in my next report. In the meantime, we are taking advantage of the location of our 19th official committee meeting here in Dublin to learn more about the Irish counterterrorism experience and challenges this country is currently facing. I would like to thank the Assistant Commissioner of the National Police and Security Service of Ireland for his readiness to engage with us, and I invite all interested members to join us tomorrow at 13. In closing, I want to express my deep appreciation for the dedication of our all members, as well as extend my heartfelt gratitude to the International Secretariat for its continuous diligent support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aydin. Our next speaker is Mrs. De Ridder from Germany.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I listened very carefully to our colleague from Turkey, and I'm very happy that we have such a worthy successor to Mr. Lopatka, whose work I greatly valued. And although he's not here today, I wish to thank him very warmly. I understood that there is a link between countering terrorism and migration. That is clear, but we shouldn't base our work only on that. We learned from the past, and Turkey was one of the places we visited. And I would like to thank Kemal Selik and the Turkish delegation for allowing us to make this trip. And we can see that poverty, destruction, and war always bear the risk of promoting terrorism. So that is a valid point. But as I said before, in our committee on migration, it is important that we also adopt a positive approach to this subject. And I would be very happy if we can conduct joint visits in the future. And we already discussed this with the committee. I would like to go back to Turkey. That's something we can discuss in depth later today. In the committee, we'll be discussing how far we can, or how we can continue our work. It's an important point, and I thank you, Madam President, for supporting us on this. That is that we work more closely with the special representatives in the committees. We did this with Mr. Sofoli for our trip to Italy in the past, and it's important that this issue, which concerns so many people in our countries, also deals with the issue of security. Indeed, but we must, and I really emphasize this, we must always focus on the positive aspect as well, because we really rely on migration because of our problems with demography. So it's very important that we work closely together. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. We now move on to the work of Ad Hoc Committee on Migration, and I would like to invite you again, Mrs. De Ridder, to comment maybe more in detail on your work regarding Ad Hoc Committee on Migration. Thank you.
Ja,
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you for allowing me once again to report. Yes, indeed, since Bucharest, we haven't led up during our meeting in Bucharest. We dealt with populist debates and looked at why so much attention is focused on migration in these debates. It's important that we emphasize the Mediterranean area, and that's why I'm very happy that I'll be able to attend the Mediterranean Forum, and I'll be very happy that the Moroccan delegation will be there. I mentioned them before. I think it's important that the North African area and our partner countries are really a part of our focus. This also applies to Israel, Jordan, Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, and if I haven't been exhaustive, please forgive me. It's important that we cooperate very closely and we focus on the situation in each country. These countries which have received so many migrants, we need more regular routes, more immigration, more labor, but we shouldn't neglect the fact that there's also a brain drain, and that's something that the Moroccan delegation, Mr. Rani, who organized this so well, I'd like to thank you very much for that. That's something they really emphasized. And so we need to focus on that aspect too of the brain drain. So emphasize desirable migration, but also focus on the problems, in particular in Turkey, which receives so many refugees from Syria and no doubt from Lebanon, and also in Lampedusa. We were there in March this year. We see that the routes are changing. So together with the Spanish delegation, we are planning a trip to the Canary Islands because there are a lot of refugees risking their lives to reach the Canary Islands. We must consider the fact that there are so many people paying so much money. I mean, you were there, Madam President. So people paying money for irregular migration, ruining themselves and their families, and then they have no prospects where they arrive. This concerns young men in particular. So there is a gender aspect. So we shouldn't just look at the vulnerable groups, which we often focus on. Women are victims of sexualized violence on these routes, but we also need to consider that young men are concerned. They are subject to dangers, they are mistreated and abused, and the smugglers, human trafficking must be stopped. It's particularly dramatic and endangers people's lives. And potentially in our OSCE region, it is such a problem which is not taken due account of, which is really shameful. So fleeing and migration is important for Ukraine still, and be rest assured, as a Vice President and a Chair of the Ad Hoc Committee on Migration, we have not let that escape our attention for Ukraine. We need to continue working on that. Thank you very much for your cooperation and for your attention.
Thank you, Daniela. I would like to thank you for your excellent work as a chair of the Migration Committee. Like you said, I was also personally in Lampedusa to see firsthand what it looks like when the refugees and migrants arrive across the Mediterranean to the island of Lampedusa. I think one of the crown jewels of this organization are the visits where we see firsthand, so that we are not just politicians who talk in conference houses and buildings, and debate between ourselves, but go to the places where we actually meet people who are living in very severe and dire conditions. Is there anybody who would like to comment on the work of the ad hoc committee on migration? Mr. Aydin, you have the floor.
Madam President, I would like to take a few minutes about the issues Madam Chair has already mentioned. Actually, before organizing, as you very well aware of the process, before organizing the CCT meeting in last May in Turkey, honestly, unofficially, we among us, we discussed that, you know, these two issues are intertwined with each other. So we better organize together in the same place, but we couldn't realize it. And I would like to say that we appreciate what she has already, you know, offered this kind of organization. Maybe from now on, in somewhere or under some such conditions, I think these two issues are very closely related then. That's why thank you. I would like to thank her as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. You are quite right. These issues can be intertwined, and we need to work together between different committees as well. I can see Farah Karimi, who raised her hand.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President. I listened very carefully to the reports of our colleagues from these two ad hoc committees, and I am also personally a member of the ad hoc committee on migration. While I think it is always very good to have cooperate, but I would strongly actually object to talk about intertwining of the migration with the terrorism. I mean, how far are we going to criminalize migration? This is really unbelievable. The people who are migrating, and as Daniela de Rieder already mentioned, these people are really in dire situations, paying money sometimes to smugglers, and really risking a lot in search for a better future for themselves and for their children. And this is something else than the terrorism. Please keep the minds, how do you say, cool, and don't go so far to criminalize and to put the migration in the same basket as anti-terrorism. I mean, where are we heading?
Thank you, Farah. That is a very good point. We need to be very delicate how we talk about this issue in order to keep things separate also. I don't see any other hands raising. So regarding the work of the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine.
Spain.
All right, Per Pons, you have the floor.
Just a short comment to emphasize what Karima said. And again, I mentioned it before. In the Draghi report, which was released 2-3 weeks ago, regarding a region like Europe, it is said by Mario Draghi, who is not, I would say, not an habitual suspect, but a former president of the Central Bank of the EU, in which it is said in page 15, Europe is entering the first period in modern history in which GDP growth will not be supported by sustained net growth of the labor force. By 2040, the EU's workforce is projected to shrink by close to 2 million workers each year, while the ratio of working to retired people is expected to fall from around 31 to 21. What I'm trying to say is that we can have a lot of links between migration and terrorism, and migration and danger and security. But the reality is that in our region, we need to integrate if we want to be competitive and we want to be puissance, as the French say, confronting the US and China. So it would be also important then to link this debate of migration to our productivity and our competitiveness. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Per Pons. And now, regarding the work of the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine, let me simply note that I have made several appointments to answer the requests to join this group and to account for some departures since Bucharest. Our group will meet tomorrow to hear from our Ukrainian colleagues on the situation in their country and their needs. We will also discuss the way forward for the Parliamentary Support Team in its second year. I invite Vice President Mikita Poturayev to also say a few words on this. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished colleagues. First of all, I'd like to thank our Irish colleagues and Irish people for friendly hospitality and magic atmosphere in Dublin. And now I would like to take this moment to acknowledge the outstanding work of the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine, which has fully proven its effectiveness in these challenging times. The dedicated efforts of all members of our special committee, especially their rapporteurs, have been instrumental in strengthening the Bucharest Declaration on all fronts crucial to Ukraine's future. This team has not only amplified Ukraine's voice within the OSCE, but has also provided vital support for our shared commitment to security, democracy, and human rights in the region. The Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine is an essential mechanism, and its continued operation is not only necessary but vital to ensuring that our collective efforts remain impactful in defending Ukraine's sovereignty and upholding the principles of our organization. Now, let me also stress some other moments. First of all, Crimea. Colleagues, Crimea for Ukraine is more than just a political slogan. For past long 10 years, the illegal occupation of Crimea has been a sad reminder about this interlinkage of the OSCE founding principles. What started as a violation of Ukraine's border later turned into gross human rights violations and immense human suffering, leading to the biggest land war in Europe in decades. Therefore, we are looking forward to President Pia Kauma's participation in the upcoming third parliamentary summit of the International Crimea Platform, to be co-hosted by Ukraine and Latvia on October 24th this year. Colleagues, already, according to UN reports, 1,000 civilians were killed or injured by Russia in August alone, is yet another evidence that peace cannot be taken for granted, but must be defended. I don't know, colleagues, if you see the bodies of the victims of the shellings of the market in Kherson the day before yesterday. Did someone see these murdered ordinary Ukrainian men and women lying next to their long-range tomatoes and apples? Russia cynically claims once again that it struck some military target. Are we ready to agree that those apples and tomatoes in pools of blood were weapons? Maybe so, because Ukraine still don't have permission to use real long-range weapons against Russian barbarians who are killing Ukrainian civilians and destroying Ukrainian civilian infrastructure with impunity. Against this backdrop, the Ukrainian leadership has recently presented the victory package for the full implementation of the peace formula. So yes, we are still talking about peace, not about war. This victory requires powerful military support for Ukraine, lifting all restriction against targeting legitimate military targets in Russia, and providing all necessary means for that. Increased pressure on Russia through diplomacy and sanctions, as well as the recognition of the fact that lasting stability can only be guaranteed if Ukraine is fully integrated into NATO and the EU. The Assembly, including the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine, can contribute to consolidating international support for this plan. By having these elements in place, we would force Moscow to end this war, with restoring a just and lasting peace in Europe and reinforcing the principles of the Helsinki Final Act. Today, freedom can prevail only if the international community remains united against the Russian war of aggression. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poturajev, for your very strong speech. Unlike I said earlier, the meeting of the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine convenes today, not tomorrow, from 1:30 to 2:30. Are there any questions or comments on the work of the PSTU? Thank you. So before I close this point, I've been told that Mr. Kyriakos Hadiani would probably like to shed some more light on the Interparliamentary Forum that was held in Montenegro. Is Kyriakos available?
Thank you very much.
Yes.
In my capacity as Special Representative for Southeast Europe, I wish to inform the Standing Committee of the actions we are taking. We established the Interparliamentary Forum of the Southeast Europe region. In the final declaration of Bucharest, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly institutionalized and welcomed the establishment of the Interparliamentary Forum. The first meeting took place in Tirana in Albania, where issues of common interest were determined. We tried to raise issues of common interest in the region on which we developed dialogue to strengthen cooperation, but also trust in the region. In other words, we have to follow a positive agenda with issues such as energy, tourism, the population and brain drain, minority rights, organized crime, climate change, water management, firefighting, and others. The second meeting was in Bucharest about the big problem of the population and brain drain in the Balkan area. The third meeting took place in Montenegro with the subject of regional cooperation for a thriving touristic sector, and it was an absolute success. Thank you once again, the Parliament in Montenegro, and also all the participant countries. Through this forum, the goal for promoting stronger relations between parliaments, but also members of parliaments across Southeast Europe is achievable, enabling them to play a central role in regional cooperation and peace building. I sincerely thank the Parliament of Albania, Montenegro, Italy, Greece, Serbia for organizing the forum in their countries, and I also warmly thank all the delegations of the countries of the region for their response. Finally, I want to assure that with the help and cooperation of the Secretariat of the Assembly, we will work hard to build trust in the Balkan region, working with a positive agenda in mind. Especially, I want to thank all the OSCE missions in the area for their support and response. I would like to thank all the participating states in Forum, Greece, North Macedonia, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, Italy, Slovenia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, San Marino, and Luxembourg, and especially the International Secretariat of OSCE PA for its support and help in this project. Also, thank you, Madam President, for your support, and Secretary General Roberto Montella for the substantial contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyriakos, and I would like to thank all our members involved in these committees for their engagement. Thank you. Then we move on to item number 6.3, upcoming Assembly events and statutory meetings. Let me inform you of our upcoming meetings. The Bureau will meet on the 4th of December, prior to the Ministerial Council meeting in Valletta. As customary, our winter meeting will be held in Vienna on the 20th and 21st of February 2025. The Bureau will meet again in Copenhagen on the 28th of April 2025. The annual session will be held in Porto in Portugal between the 29th of June and the 3rd of July next year. I would also like to inform the Standing Committee that unfortunately San Marino will be unable to host our autumn meeting next year. We are therefore actively looking for a delegation to host us 1 year from now. I thank you in advance for inquiring with your national parliament about this. Hosting one of our statutory meetings is one of the concrete ways you can support our work. Do any of our future hosts wish to briefly take the floor? I also want to inform you of 2 additional events taking place in the coming weeks and months. Next week, I will lead a PA delegation to focus on the work of the OSCE mission to Serbia. This will be the inaugural visit in a series of events which you approved in Bucharest and which is aimed at better preparing us to engage with and support the OSCE governmental side. I thank all the delegations who have nominated participants, and I look forward to reporting on this initiative at the winter meeting. Does anyone wish to comment on this activity?
Pritchard's UK.
Mr. Pritchard from UK, you have the floor.
Hi, just a point of clarification, Madam President. Did you say the 4th of November or December? Because I thought you said November, and I thought the meeting was in December. Forgive me. Thank you.
The Bureau meeting will meet on the 4th of December, prior to the Ministerial Council meeting in
Thank you.
Valletta.
That's what I thought.
Yes,
you
yes.
actually mentioned November, which would have caused.
I'm
issues.
sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. So, any other comments on activities? Italy, Mr. Eugenio Gioffili, you have the floor.
Grazie, grazie. Thank you, President Camo. On the agenda, we wanted to refer to the committee and the events that we're organizing in our country. And for the 22nd of November, we're organizing a meeting on a woman that is following on from the supplementary item presented by Senator Campione pertaining to violence against women as a weapon of war. It will be in Rome at the Senate for the 5th and 6th of December, as mentioned by the chair of the Committee to Counter Terrorism in Italy. At the lower house of the Parliament, we'll be holding 2 events organized by our committee in collaboration with the United Nations, and I'd like to express thanks for the support from the Secretariat through Dr. Bonabello and our Vice President, recently appointed Manuele Lo Perfido from the Counterterrorism Committee. For the first 6 months of 2025, there is the meeting with the president of the Forum for the Southeastern Europe, Kyriakos Adjani, and we intend to organize a forum for the 6 countries in Southeastern Europe, focusing on combating organized crime, which I'll also be involved in my role as Special Representative to combat organized crime. We received a letter indicating that San Marino will not be able to hold the autumn meeting, and on this topic we could possibly look into the matter further. In the margins of this meeting, we started. We have some difficulties logistically, but we want to talk about this in the margins of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gioffili. Any other comments? Yes, San Marino, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd just like to specify that withdrawal, unfortunately, we had to raise this point, but for reasons of logistics, we will not be able to carry out this activity, but we will do our best to look together with you at a possible side event together with the Secretariat at within the next year, let's say, a side event devoted to a specific subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to take the floor? Finally, let me highlight that the Parliament of Turkmenistan and the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly will organize the second Ashgabat conference on parliamentary diplomacy in the OSCE area. Dialogue as a tool for building bridges for a secure and peaceful future. This event will take place on the 27th and 28th of November this year in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan. Registration is now open for all OSCE delegations. Are there any comments on this? If not, it is time to move on our agenda to item number 7, any other business. Does anyone wish to raise any other issues? Mr. Gerasimov from Ukraine, you have the floor.
Dear colleagues, I want to use this possibility one more time to remind what's going on in Ukraine and why it's really important for the Assembly. But in the beginning, I want one more time to say thank you for the Assembly. Thank you for every one of you for supporting our country, for supporting our people. A few days ago, several days ago, 2 Shaheds from Iran were shot down exactly above my house. Exactly above. A couple of weeks ago, one of the Russian missiles were shot down exactly above my house. And my children in my yard just connecting the parts of the missiles, they just collecting the parts of the drones and showing me. The same the children from my neighbors are doing. That's for you to understand what every Ukrainian, including MPs, are feeling and how close the war for everybody in Ukraine. And I understand that everybody tired. I understand. I understand it. But I told many times during our events that the chain didn't start in Ukraine. Chain started in Chechnya, no prompt reply. Transnistria, no prompt reply. After invasion to Georgia, no prompt reply from the free world. Occupation of Crimea, occupation of Donetsk and Lugansk region of Ukraine, and now full-scale invasion. And even despite everybody is really tired, we need to finish this job. Otherwise, will be next events, very bad events, will be next invasions. Because let me remind you that Russia brutally violated all principles, all norms of Helsinki Final Act and all the principles of the international community. And more, we as Assembly and free world, all your countries, did so huge efforts already that in case now we will not do other efforts, it means that all we did previously will be useless. Please don't allow that. And our tiredness, this is exactly what Russia wants. They want, to switch attention out of Ukraine. They want you not to support Ukraine. But at the same time, just for information, Russia increasing their military budget approximately plus 30%. $143 billion for the next year. That's only the open lines of the budgets. And also have a lot of hidden money which they are spending for the military aggression. Next point, very, very important, migration. I highly appreciate all efforts of our Migration Committee, of the Assembly, of all your countries, but please don't forget that now millions of Ukrainians are unfortunately not in Ukraine. And this is really serious problem. We want them to come back. But at the moment, I kindly ask you to speak with your governments to continue support of Ukrainians, because we are expecting extremely difficult winter. And we are expecting many hours without electricity for many families in Ukraine, especially in the big cities. Just be aware of that and kindly ask your governments to continue support of Ukrainians now, because it's very, very important. You know, I strongly believe that we are now already in the 1939. And I want to remind you that this war is lasting for the last 10 years. And 3 years, almost 3 years, Ukraine is fighting after the full-scale invasion. 3 years, we are stopping this aggression and not allowing them to go further. Because Ukraine is not the final target for Russians. The final target is Europe. Because all of us, very well know history. And last but not least, you know, I want to tell it now, and I will tell these words throughout all our autumn meeting. We need unity. We need your unity in issues in support Ukraine. We need your energy, because we need effective support. We need your energy in decision-making. We need your energy in sanctions. We need your energy in military support of Ukrainian army. And also, we need fairness, because fairness is the very right word when we are speaking about Ukraine. And unity, energy, fairness. I will repeat it, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Gerasimov. I would also like to thank all of you for your active contribution to this standing committee meeting. We will see each other again in about 3 hours at our inaugural session, which will take place in this same hall at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This meeting is closed.